Sarah, you and Alex have a workshop planned for March, right?
True. Yeah, it's coming up in a couple of months. This is our intentional non-monogamy workshop, Building Strong Foundations for Polyamory. If you or you and your partner are considering going from monogamy to non-monogamy and you're not really sure how to prepare, or if you've already maybe taken some steps in that direction and have hit some speed bumps, like I did, this is the workshop for you. Or that's what we're hoping to build, is a workshop for folks in those really early stages. We want to help you learn from your mistakes and also ours. So we're offering a day-long workshop. It's on March 21st, as you mentioned, the equinox.
Ooh,
nice. Meaningful in that way. In this workshop, we'll explore common pitfalls of early non-monogamy, helpful foundational tools for moving through some of the internal and interpersonal challenges that are going to arise, and help you develop some of your own intentions for moving forward in a new style of relationship. So that's the workshop. It's something we've been asked to do, and we've sort of kicked around for a couple of years now, and this feels like the year to give it a try. I always like to tell people that in addition to making a lot of mistakes and then putting them on blast on a podcast, I am a licensed mental health clinician, and I have years of experience working with queer, polyamorous, and non-monogamous clients. I'm trauma-informed, I'm attachment-based in my work, and I really love working with people who are in these early stages. And Alex, in addition to, bringing 5 or 6 years of lived enthusiastic experience to the workshop.
Thorough experience.
Is an educator, and he specializes in one-on-one and group mentorship. And he brings so much humor and warmth and kind of rigor to all of the educating and teaching that he does. He's such a great educator. He's also a Capricorn moon.
Ooh.
And so his commitment to logistical detail is almost as strong as his killer dimples.
Aw. Well, yeah, find links to register for that workshop in the show notes and on Instagram. And with that, let's talk a little bit about this interview with Sophie Lucido Johnnson.
Welcome to Mistakes Were Made, a podcast about non-monogamy for messy people like us. I'm Sarah. I'm a queer, non-monogamous therapist, parent, and writer. And I'm also always thinking about the best ways we might hold on to ourselves and each other as the world falls apart.
And I'm Jessica, here producing today and standing in for our usual co-host, Alex, your usual co-host, Alex, who will be here for the interview portion of this episode, but you and I are going to introduce it here. And it's January now, but we're still talking about loneliness and family.
I feel like winter in the Pacific Northwest deserves a couple of episodes about loneliness, isolation, family relationships, and how we can feel connected to ourselves and each other when there's 4 hours of daylight.
Yeah. Right.
And we're underneath a river.
And it's it feels good. It always feels really good to me to be started moving in the other direction, right? At least we're getting 1 more minute of sunlight every day instead of 1 less minute. That is a meaningful change to me, but it's true that we're still staring down the barrel of another couple months of dark.
It makes me think of running. So I'm a runner, and then I say that, and I'm that makes me sound like more of a jock than I actually am. But I run regularly, right? And they talk about the heartbreak half mile in running a lot. And the idea is it's actually towards the end of a really big, challenging run. Or if we were extending this as a metaphor, experience or season, where you find yourself really you can see the finish line, and this is where it gets hard. January is still a ways away from the finish line, but
Heartbreak, 2 miles. I don't know. But it's so true. Like, I think about that with hiking. I think about it with like family vacations, where it's kind of just like the last like 17% of whatever experience is just, it's going to be hard. Like, it might have been perfect the whole time. You didn't fight with your family, whatever. And then you just get to that heartbreak half mile. It's almost over. And like something happens and the mood sours and, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that because it makes me realize that in our previous episode about loneliness and the winter, and being alone versus lonely, we didn't address the value of the dark, which is something that I like to think about this time of year. I mean, we're past the solstice, but we're still like in a period of dark. And, obviously as a therapist, the shadow and, those kind of like murkier, shadowier, less visited, maybe scarier corners of our mind, our lives, our psyche, the year can be really maligned. And we're
Yeah.
just like, avoid, get through,
Get
fuck
me out of
that,
here.
right? But I really believe in the value of those darker corners and those darker months and those periods where you're like, woof, it's like, now it's getting rough. Or now it's a little bit harder, or now this is like harder material. So I think of it as like the time when we go like gathering kind of inward
Yeah. Yeah.
to see what's there.
Yeah.
So that we can then explode outward again with the sun, having like kind of learned something, gone somewhere. It's a different kind of journey. I'm on a kind of a reverie here, but I'm feeling it. Timothy Egan is a writer here in the Pacific Northwest who once said that we have so many creative people here because this is a paraphrase, because we have such a dramatic dichotomy of light and dark.
Yeah.
And so there's like half the year where you like explode out into the world and you have all of these external adventures and you're gathering all of this information kind of outside of the self. And then you go inward. And this is the period where you're like, your journey is an inward journey and you're sort of synthesizing, like, what did you learn out in the world? How did it impact you? And then what you learn in that inward journey gets brought back out into the world again. So there's like a real sort of like cyclical outward, inward kind of relationship. And I just note that like, this is a tough time of year, but it's tough for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that opportunity, and also there's a little bit of being pushed, but it's a lot of opportunity to look inward and just know that, it won't stay dark forever. Right. And sometimes that light, those long days can feel oppressive too, right?
right.
Like you have to be out and seeing people and doing things and coming up with stuff and be super productive. Like this is not a time of year that feels like that. And I mean, this is so relevant to this conversation with Sophie Lucido Johnnson that we're about to have. In some ways, like, I think in her writing and work, the pandemic shows up as sort of like a version of this, right? Like a period of hibernation or a period of turning inward.
Yes.
And I think that's a lot where sort of the book that she's talking about in this episode has a lot of its seeds and germination, gestation, if you will, during the pandemic time. You and Alex had this conversation with Sophie. I had to leave to go to a dentist appointment.
That's right. Self-care.
Right. But yeah, I'm curious. We had that conversation a month or two ago now. What has stood out in your mind from talking with Sophie?
Yeah, some of the things that have really stayed with me were, one of them is an observation about how polyamory, writing about polyamory and exploring polyamory directly is still something that's like pretty marginal. And it can be hard for people to relate to it. And so Sophie talks about how in her earlier work, that was kind of her point of entry. And it was sometimes hard to get traction or people would bounce off of it really quickly because it just felt like something they weren't interested in. When she re-envisioned what she was writing about as new types of family and kinship and community, suddenly everybody was interested and looking for it. And the polyamory that she brings into her writing is like a tool that she is using to cultivate those things, but
Yeah.
it's not the first point of entry. So
Oh,
I
so
noticed that
interesting.
as like obviously a person who does a lot of thinking, writing, talking about polyamory, that everything that we are exploring here and naming it polyamory is stuff that other people are interested
Yeah.
in and thinking about
Mm-hmm.
and concerned about, and recognizing that we want to be able to be free and resourced to have different and new types of relationships that feel satisfying and connected and safe.
Yeah.
And some of us are like, we're using polyamory as one of our tools. And some of us are like, no, thank you, never. But actually, the goals are very, very similar across
Right.
many groups of people.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so, so powerful. And so how interesting that she found that with her
Yeah.
writing. And it makes me think about like stuff we've talked about in journalism for many, many years, like that, you know, the story is not always about what it's about, right? And like maybe for some people, poly, it's like a hook. They're like sexy, exact. Like I'm like, tell me about the sex party or whatever. But I know I have talked to lots of folks who listen to this show, and me myself, I am not polyamorous. Um, but I get so much out of these conversations, and I loved listening to this conversation that you all had with Sophie.
As a therapist, and I think especially as a relationship therapist, 90% of my job, and I will say this to clients, 90% of my job is to determine what we are actually talking about.
Yeah, yeah,
And it will take months, years,
yeah,
an entire session, many sessions to actually figure that out.
yeah.
You know, are we
Right.
really talking about your husband not supporting you in a party you want to throw? Or are we talking about, past ruptures between the two of you around social anxiety
Mm,
and isolation,
mm,
right? It takes us a while to like get down into what we are really
yeah.
speaking to. But one of the things that I find comforting is once we get down there, most of us are talking about the same things.
Mm.
And this also reminds me of my time in journalism. This is like perhaps the first time I've ever admitted this on this podcast,
Ooh.
but for a period, I was a weekly columnist at the Seattle Times, which
Mm-hmm.
I can hardly
Link in the
believe.
show notes.
Yeah. And one of my little quips or mottos, or like, I don't know if there was like a masthead to my column, which was about local global connections, was that I was very interested in all the ways that we are different, but more interested in the ways that we are the same.
Yeah.
And I think that that continues to be true as I, am in this other profession, this new profession. There are so many different ways that the same experience of being human manifests.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
we're always just like moving towards that like more collective, relatable experience.
Yeah. Oh, God. That's so true. It's so true. Well, and I think it's related to, one of my favorite tidbits. I mean, this is a great conversation. I'm so excited for you all to listen to it. But one of my favorite things that Sophie talks about in this interview is the opportunity or observation that we should be trying to create more space and opportunity in life for people who are not biological parents to parent children, and that we should be creating more space for people who are parents
Yes.
to not have to be parenting for a period of time, right? And this is something that I connect with so much as a person who, I mean, I very much identify as a parental figure to your kids.
Absolutely.
I think I'm like technically, legally their godmother,
You
but
are.
also like I'm their, I'm their TT, and I'm their, they're so, so important to me. And I, as a person who is not a biological or any kind of, I'm not like a parent other than being a godmother
Well,
and a
you and I
TT,
became
right?
blood
It's hard.
sisters back
Oh,
in
that's true.
1988,
80.
so biologically you are.
Okay, there you go. Well, never mind. I'll cut that whole part.
Thanks.
But as someone who is not a parent in any of the sort of like traditional senses of the word, I very much feel like I get to be a parent because your kids are such an important part of my life. And I felt like I personally changed profoundly like the moment that you had your first kid.
Mm-hmm.
Probably while you were pregnant with them. Like it was transformative experience for me.
Yeah.
And so I've thought about that a lot and I love it and blah, blah, blah. And then I like thinking about sort of the other half of what Sophie was saying in that thought, like that also when people become parents, it doesn't need to subsume everything about who they
Right.
are, and they need opportunities to also spend time feeling like they're not parents or like that they are just really feeling into themselves as in their own needs and feelings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. That's like this idea that we want to deepen and strengthen the connections in relationships in our lives and communities that are devalued,
Yeah.
right? I think as a parent, your relationship to yourself is devalued,
Mm.
and your relationship to anyone or anything that isn't explicitly about your parenting self is devalued.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then similarly, I think for folks who don't have biological children, their role in children's lives devalued.
Right.
Not seen as real, not seen as important. It reminds me of something that Dean Spade said that you and I were just discussing, that we want to treat our friends more like lovers and our lovers more like friends. And again, I think it's that idea of sort of rebalancing these relationships and these bonds, these kinship bonds that we're going to be talking about today. Rebalancing them to get back to a place where these relationships that aren't emphasized by our culture are valued and these connections are valued. And I think that is, if we're looking for that universal experience of connection that feels safe and it feels authentic, and satisfying, I think that's what is called for in this moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
Sophie Lucido Johnnson is an award-winning cartoonist and writer based in Chicago. Her latest book is Kin, The Future of Family. She's also the author of Many Love, a memoir of polyamory and finding loves, Love Without Sex, Stories on the Spectrum of Modern Relationships, and Dear Sophie, Love Sophie, a graphic memoir in diary entries, letters, and lists. She is a cartoonist for The New Yorker and teaches at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Hey, Sophie. Hi. Thanks for being here.
Welcome.
Welcome. I'm so glad to have you.
So glad to be here.
Okay. So I was up last night and then this morning reading more of your new book, Kin.
Thank you.
And it's timely and exciting and just feels like it really resonates with a lot of things that I'm thinking about and I know folks in our community are thinking about. So it's a really exciting book and congratulations.
Thank you. And thank you for spending time with it. I feel like that's such a gift. It's a weird thing to write a book and then say, okay, well, I'm now asking you to give an incredible amount of your time to me, a stranger, and just like trust that I have something to give you. But I really appreciate that. It's a really kind thing to do, to read a book.
Yeah. My pleasure, and it was time well spent. And I was really grappling with where to dive in because there's so much in it. But I think for me, the kind of starting point is just your interest in exploring how we might reimagine or return to understanding family and kin. That feels like the like thesis statement of the book. So I just wanted to toss that back to you right at the top of the podcast and talk to us a little bit about what kin means to you, what it means to be reimagining it. Why write a book about that right now?
Yeah, I mean, it sprung out of spending the pandemic, like the height of the pandemic, with a lot of with another couple and just being like in a larger group than some of my friends who were all alone or all alone with a kid, which seems really hard. You had a kid you had kids during that time. I didn't, mine wasn't around yet, but we got pregnant during the pandemic and so did our roommates. And just all the things that were easier because we were 4 adults instead of 2 adults, which extended through pregnancy and through like having babies. They lived with us while our babies had their first, years on the earth. And I thought, well, this is like so much better than I feel like anyone else is anyone else who's like going through this stage of life seems to be experiencing. And my first book was about polyamory, and it was a non-starter for a lot of people. Like I'm sure you found too, like people sometimes hear polyamory and they just shut down. They're like, this is not for me. I don't want to have sex with 9 people at once, which is what they assume that is what it is.
That's actually how you get sort of hazed into polyamory, indoctrinated
You must,
into it. You
yeah.
have to have
What's
sex
weird,
with
but
9 people.
It's exactly 9, yeah.
I don't know why it's that number, but we'll do a podcast
The
about it.
polyamory council decided that. Yeah.
But I felt so sad for people who obviously I love all types of relationship structures, and there are so many different ways to love people. But I felt so sad that all of the things we learn in poly relationships like don't get to translate to monogamous folks or people who are in more like nuclear traditional standard family configurations. So my hope was to write a book that would be for everyone who's feeling spread thin, and to wonder about, are there ways we can redefine family that will be more easeful for everybody, especially as my generation and also the one right above me and the one right below me are living further from family of origins. We need family, and like we should be building it in ways that are not just have babies and live in your house. That's too much for people, I think. So that's what I wanted to tackle, and I wanted to just talk to people who are building alternative family structures. And wow, there are so many, and it is so inspiring and exciting. And I also think as we move into the end of the global extinction, to be frank, we have to be using fewer resources and depending on each other instead of like one day Amazon shipping more. So like it all kind of feels related. Like I just think there's like a better way to be in relationship with one another. So I was hoping to research that and learn about that, and now here we are.
Yeah. Congratulations on bringing up global extinction faster than any other previous podcast guest. Usually it takes like 20 minutes.
Wow,
So.
thank
That's
you so
actually
much.
the E, not explicit. It stands for extinction.
Yeah.
I was going to say that reading your book, I was thinking about how COVID books or books about COVID or books inspired by COVID as a genre, I think have been, at least for me, kind of unsatisfying, or there's been something missing from the way they've talked about the experience. I really appreciated how you talked about it and as a kind of impetus for this book, because as someone who was becoming a therapist at the time, I was in graduate school and I was actually doing my internship and practicum via telehealth during COVID.
Wow. Yeah.
I had 2 small kids at the time. We were opening up our relationship at that time as well. And I think that one of the kind of key experiences of COVID for me, for people in my community, for clients, was this one of extreme isolation and what happened to people and their relationships in that extreme isolation. And what makes that so important to look at is it wasn't that COVID created all of that isolation.
Right.
In fact, we were already on a trajectory of a culture and a society and demographics that were incredibly isolated into smaller and smaller units, increasingly dependent on a few relationships and frankly, just like the kind of structure of dependency that late stage capitalism creates.
Yeah.
And COVID came in and just like put a microscope on that and really highlighted where we kind of were in the culture. The impacts of mental health on people are still being felt today.
Oh my God.
In my practice,
Yeah.
every week in my practice, some fallout from the COVID years is being explored, whether that's the end of a relationship or, mental health crises that like the tail of which have been really long, or physical impacts. So I really appreciated that your book
identified that this isolation from each other is really where a lot of the damage was done with COVID, but also it was damage that was already being done.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of threads to pick up there, but I imagine in the mental health field you're seeing it nonstop. We're seeing it on a global scale. Like I think so many of the big problems we are facing right now are a direct result of us not dealing with a global mental health crisis that came from a collective trauma that everybody experienced at once and nobody had the opportunity to treat. I'm a teacher. Like, I taught high school during the pandemic, and like my students should not have, I never saw them. I had a whole year I never even saw their faces, and they graduated. Like, that's not, they didn't get a whole year they didn't get their senior year of high school. They didn't get it. It didn't happen for them. That is wrong. That was wrong. That's not how we should have dealt with that. But now we're dealing with the fallout of it. So, I mean, God bless you for being a therapist. I think that's like one of the most crucial, if not the most crucial thing that, the global population needs, on a large scale. But also I would quote, I think I quoted in the book, I spoke to the activist Bear Bergman, who's like a trans poly writer, really great writer. And when I was talking to him, he said that he early in COVID sort of not joked that everyone who he knew who had kids should have been paired up with somebody who didn't, to like be, forcibly put together, because the loneliness for single people or even for just like couples, in contrast with the just overwhelm of having to be a parent 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. None of that is how our animal selves exist. Like, with this, it was all really, really hard for our bodies. And it could have just been, I mean, according to Bear, which I think it's an exaggeration, but like if we had been put together, we could have done better, and that's actually one of the easiest takeaways from my research is like, single people need to be spending time with kids. People who have kids need to be spending less time with their kids. Like, if you have a kid, you should be less possessive over the way that your kid is raised. And that's more of a community decision. And if you don't have a kid, like, you should be more invested in the way that your friends' kids are raised. And like, that is actually on a primate level, natural, makes sense. Like, and on just a level of everyone's searching for meaning and also more space. Like, we have what we need. It's not actually like hard. It's hard because it's not how we learn to understand family. But, when you let go of some of those social constructions, you're like, oh, this is just available to me. Like, a better life is just available.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when I think about the pandemic in retrospect, it definitely is like, you can see how the main fallout was the sort of loss of meaning that you just referenced, like that. I think this has happened with a lot of people with their jobs, but certainly like with traditional family structures too, like just having those structures like pressed to the limit. And if you're coming in with the idea that like, oh, I'm supposed to be like really happy and fulfilled with my, my monogamous partner and my 1 or 2 children or whatever, then being like, okay, well, do that in complete isolation 24 hours a day, do everything for those people. It really, like, I think blows that idea apart. Like, obviously that's not possible. And I guess what you're kind of saying with this book is that maybe it's never been possible, but there is another way that is more possible.
Yeah, Sarah, you brought up like this was a problem pre-COVID, and that is, all the research is there. I mean, I think the first article I wrote about loneliness was like maybe 2018, 2019. It was definitely pre-COVID. And already the Harvard Science on Loneliness was published. That sort of, exciting statistic of being lonely is more dangerous than 15 cigarettes a day, which I feel like is everywhere, but is everywhere because it's so startling to think, oh, I could smoke 15 cigarettes a day and be healthier than if I was lonely. It's also more.
I love that statistic because then there's a world in which I might be able to get away with smoking cigarettes.
Yeah, I know.
Exactly.
And who wants
the loneliness side?
And you know what, Sarah? You don't want 15. I mean, that's so many. Like, just even 1 or 2.
Right? I just need like 2.
Just
2 with like some good friends.
Yeah,
that's
2 with friends.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's worse than obesity and alcoholism for your health. Like, all of these things proven over and over again, multi-year longitudinal studies through Harvard pre-COVID, they were proving this.
Could you talk a little bit about like what is sort of behind that? I've certainly heard that statistic before, and like we're comparing like a sort of physical health thing to like a social thing. How do you think that plays out, or what's your understanding of that?
We're talking about like what is leading to premature death and how much sooner you're going to die. So, what is health? That's a whole big fun question, especially fun in our, mid age. But it is the question of like, when are you going to die? If you are living in isolation, if you are a person who is lonely, and isolation, I should note, is like different from solitude. Loneliness is different than being alone. Those are different things. Loneliness implies like, I want to be around people. I long for, connection. I don't have it. So that's causing like the mental health stress, the strain on the nervous system in connection with these loose ties and absent of loose ties, which are really important, which means like if you're quite isolated and, for example, you've got a weird spot, or like you start to have a cough, or like you're sick, or something's a little bit off, like someone who sees you every day is going to be able to say, "Hey man, what's going on? You look odd." Like you're just much more likely to go see a doctor or like pay attention to something that's a little out of the ordinary. Similarly, if you've ever like I've always lived with roommates, and I have this sort of like, when they go out of town, this like joy of, oh my God, I get to have the house to myself. And the first day it's so great. I'm just naked and eating chips and I'm so happy. And then the second day it's like, okay. And I'm still naked and eating chips and like less happy. And then by the end of the week, I'm still naked and eating chips, but like really sad. And it is like being around people, we treat ourselves better, because like we do need like to be around people to not just take advantage of the amply available dopamine that is everywhere. You're just like more likely to eat salads and go for walks and just do things that are good for your body when you're around other people. So there's just all these different contributing factors to the health benefits of connection. And I think it's just so clear, like we just need each other. We need each other. It makes sense that we need each other, because ultimately we're like a part of a species, and species need to survive, and they don't survive in isolation. So we are just one of the most individualized species on Earth. And I don't know, we're surviving, but are we?
I really am appreciating this identification of loneliness and isolation as the big issue that we're trying to address and re-understand, especially in the face of, well, impending extinction, to use our E, and the falling apart, the dismantling of so many systems of support, whether or not they were all that supportive to begin with. The systems are being dismantled. But I wanted to get into kind of like the quality of relationships too. You said a moment ago that it's all available, we can just have it. And one of the things that I was struck by, and maybe this gets into like one of my favorite threads to pull in this podcast, which is like, is polyamory actually doing as good a job at addressing some of these issues as we'd like to think?
Mm-hmm.
As a relationship therapist, I would be remiss not to point out that there are a lot of people in relationships and in polyamorous relationships who are still grappling with loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the quality of the way we are relating to ourselves and each other should get thrown in the mix here as we talk about these structures. And certainly, I don't come from, at least not in recent generations, a collectivist culture, but folks I know who do would identify that just being in big extended families or in houses full of people doesn't necessarily mean that you're being like cared for or attuned to or connected in a way that feels healthy and sustainable. So I just wanted to like toss that out to the two of you and see what your thoughts are about that, about quality of relating. And maybe the material is here, but our ability to actually like apply it in a way that feels like healthy and sustainable is what is hard.
Yeah. I mean, Alex, am I cutting you off if I keep talking? You sure?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is, such an important question. And so in this book, like one of the first chapters, maybe the third chapter, is about the the self-work, which I know I'm sure you're doing as a therapist, but the self-work being like absolutely essential, you have to do that first. And so the question becomes like, what are your needs? Like, what are your needs? And that question, it's just shocking. I'm sure you find this too all the time, how much people aren't asking that. You hear it when you hear people talking about like, well, you went out with this person and that just wasn't fair, and it like wasn't okay because you didn't follow the rules and you didn't tell me in advance. So I'm talking poly stuff, but like, that's just fucked up. Like, I would never do that to you. Well, nowhere in there did you state a need. You just said all of these sorts of assumptions. You have them, but you're like pushing them away in favor of like sort of a righteousness, like what is right and wrong. And needs are so different from person to person. And it's really hard to identify what are the things you need. So at the center of this book is like thinking about all your close connections that you already have, or people you're spending your time on at least, and trying to figure out like what needs are you getting met by that person. And if none, okay, well, you're spending a lot of time on a person who's not meeting any of your needs. You only have a finite amount of time. So we should make some adjustments around that. And also this idea of that's central to polyamory theory is like, there's not going to be one person who's going to meet all of your needs. It's an unrealistic expectation. I think that concept can exist inside a monogamous relationship as well. It's just my romantic partner is the person who meets my need for orgasms and like having a dinner partner and like someone to co-shop with me. But I also have a person I need to talk to about like stuff that's going on at work because my partner does not know how to do that. So rather than saying, hey, partner, I need you to change, it's like, I have this need. Who else can meet it? So a lot of this is mapping really, or like, spending a lot of time thinking about what you need, where you're getting your needs met, and how can you continue to develop those relationships or be really intentional and conversational about getting the needs met. Alex, what are you thinking? You're having thoughts. I'm seeing thoughts.
Yeah, and that seems like it's a lifelong journey, right?
Yeah.
Based on, so I spent a lot of time with your previous book, Many Love, coming into this, and if I were to like kind of like describe sort of the arc of that book, it's like you're really talking about your journey, like from an adolescent who's like obsessed with monogamous relationships and like being like finding somebody who's everything for you, but especially like being everything for somebody else and like meeting all of their needs, and then like journeying through opening that up to different kinds of connections and like understanding different kinds of connections, both polyamory ones. But the chapter that really stuck out for me the most was, I think, maybe the chapter that kind of like leads into this new book, where called Just Friends, where you're talking about like your understanding of friendships as like really important, and maybe some of the like intersection between friendships and romantic relationships, and like how that all kind of works. Could you talk a little bit about that, and then maybe like how you got from that book, that very like, I guess it was a pretty like hopeful pre-pandemic feeling book, into where we are now in the conversation we're having today?
I mean, these questions are so great. I don't think anyone who's interviewed me this press cycle has spent any time with that book. So you're like 100% right. That is,
I misunderstood the assignment and didn't know that there was another book, to be perfectly honest.
Really
but it was great. I really enjoyed it.
I mean, I really appreciate it. That is exactly what happened. Like, that chapter was my favorite chapter. It's always the one I read when I was touring with that book. And I thought, like, I feel like everyone can get something out of this idea of nurturing our friendships more intentionally. And I felt frustrated that people weren't even able to access it because they heard the word polyamory and they were just shut off. And so I've been wanting to. I did a project after that called Love Without Sex that was also in response to that. That was an audio project. And then this one came on the heels of like having kids. And I don't know, I'm sure this was true isn't this true for everybody, where you're like, I think I know how to have kids. And then you have kids and you're like, oh shit, I don't know. And this is really like they say it's hard, and then you keep hearing it's hard and you're like, well, but I'm sure people do this, so I'm sure I'll figure it out. But then you don't.
I mean, I feel like one of the things that nothing can prepare you for with kids is how they're going to hold a mirror up to you that is perfectly designed to poke at the hardest corners, the most hidden, darkest little corners of you.
Yeah.
And it's like, of course, the labor itself is grinding. And of course, like the immense responsibility is overwhelming. And there's all of that. But I have found that is truly like the spiritual challenge of raising kids is what I was not prepared for.
Yeah.
And I'm not prepared for every single day that I wake up and do it.
Right. I wanted to take the idea of friendship and see, where can we, it was this absence of a word. It's like you have the word friend and you have the word family and you have the word partner. And actually there's like 1,000 words for partner, boyfriend, girlfriend. I'm seeing him, like we're going together, whatever. I don't know why I suddenly went to 1953, but like
going steady.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've been banned. Heavy petting. But there's no word for like the different gradations of friendships that are natural in our lives. Like you're talking about, my friend Bethany, who lived here during the pandemic, she left the door open when she peed. This is a different level of friendship than the person who I work with. And I am appreciative of our connection as well. But like, there's an amount of time you spend with there's a number. There've been studies on this, like how many hours does it take to become a close friend with someone? And the number is like 250. That's so many hours. Unless you're like living with people, which is why
that's why roommates become friends.
And you get a lot of your closest friends in college because you're really close to them all the time, like spending all this time. But in adulthood, you're rarely spending 250 hours with people, and it is just these close so I wanted a word. Kin is the word I'm suggesting for like these people who are more than friends. I wanted this book to be called More Than Friends, but my publisher said it sounded too sexual. But I meant it as like more than friends in a way of like they're more than my friend. but like I'm not married to them because they're my friend.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I was going to say that one of the things I think about a lot, we're talking about polyamory, you hear the word and people shut down. They're like, I can never do that. I have been working on this theory for a couple of years that I actually think the more taboo thing, culturally challenging thing, is to have varied intimacy in your life, right? To polyamory, at start, does not actually challenge all that much about our culture, especially a culture that is really obsessed with us being isolated and dependent on capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
There is a way that it challenges the nuclear family, potentially. That is one of my favorite things about it, because I do find it like really rebellious and revolutionary there. But insofar as polyamory stays really fixated on and obsessed with intimacy via romance and sex, we're actually perpetuating the same culture of isolation and sort of like satellite units.
Mm-hmm.
The really challenging stuff for people, when I think about how I present my life to the world, people find it titillating and like interesting that I have multiple romantic or sexual partners at times. But the stuff that really kind of gets at them is that I co-own a house with another couple. That during the pandemic, we were potted up with 4 other families, actually. That I consider someone that I have like no sexual or romantic connection to, a life partner. That I share financial ties with people that I have no legal ties to.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things that people like really raise eyebrows at. And I think that sometimes polyamory misses its opportunity to actually be as challenging and exciting and revolutionary, because it doesn't dive into that. that side of things.
Yeah, what I was going to say is that I think what was kind of like the hardest thing for me about reading that chapter in your book was the realization that, like, all of those things that Sarah said being true, the polyamorous relationships that I have, just like observing how big of a distance there are, or like there not being a clear path between those relationships and the kind of like kinship closeness that you're describing, and how difficult it is, to like turn something that starts as an intense romantic relationship into like a lasting friendship, or entangle lives in a way in a romantic context where you're starting with that point of like kind of doing things, in spite of it being polyamorous, like doing things sort of traditionally with like a NRE and a little bit of a relationship escalator and stuff like that. It's like, how do you jump from that to the next, to the kinship level? Is that something that like you feel like you ever did? Or did those things kind of happen separately?
Yeah, I think, personally, I have had the same 3 relationships for like the past 10 years. And so they 10 to 13 years. And so that's sort of like dance card full, like in terms of who am I going to have sex with? I just don't have more emotional
And that's
energy.
with the person that you're married to, Luke?
So Luke is my husband, and my girlfriend Kat lives in the neighborhood. We bought our house very near her house, and she's also married. And I do feel like a partnership with her husband as well. And then I have a boyfriend from New Orleans who's like in that first book, whose name is Bob, who lives now in California. And our relationship is like really different because we talk on the phone once a week, which already is like, oh, that's so much time. just be talking on the phone. But I see him, once a year. That's it. And that's great. That's like, so that's plenty for me. What makes the relationship a partnership is the amount of time we've been committed to that amount of communication. And so in terms of like jumping from one thing to another, I think it returns to the question of what are the needs that you have, and who is meeting those needs and how. And so I actually think it's like Bob is a perfect example. Bob is a person who I don't need that much from. Like we're using this label of boyfriend or partner, which is great. Because, there've been times we have been physically intimate, and times when I was pregnant, no, I wasn't having sex with. He was here for like a whole month of my pregnancy. I couldn't have sex with him because I just couldn't have sex. I was like, my body felt really weird. And he was so, he was so okay with it. Maybe he was so okay with it. I was going to say maybe he wasn't, but I know that he was, because what we have that's really great is he's a really, really valuable person to have boundaries with, or just to say like, I don't really want to do that. I can't talk this week. I actually have to cancel on you. Like all of these things that are kind of the opposite of what I'm advocating for in friendships. I think friendships, Dean Spade talks about like treating your friends a little bit more like your lovers, and your lovers a little more like your friends. He's that latter. Like I feel like I can cancel. I feel like I can say no. I feel like I can like take space, and he's just going to be so open to that. And that's really valuable. So he's meeting a really specific need, but he's not watching my kid. Like for the most part, he's not watching my kid. My close friend Jess, who was my best friend in high school, moved across the street about a year and a half ago, a little bit over a year ago, from Portland. So from Portland to Chicago. And I see her every day. Like, I see her every day. It sounds like you guys have some relationships like this. We have dinner together every night, and she does watch my kid a ton. And yeah, she is my life partner. And she's meeting a lot of my needs. She is not identifying in any way as polyamorous. And in my brain, I'm like, all right, you don't have to. Like that word is helping me, but you're definitely in a life partnership with me and also your husband. So, or her boyfriend, I guess they're not married. But it's like you look at your relationship and you're like, what is this giving to me, and what am I giving to it? How is this reciprocal? And if you're finding, oh, this isn't meeting me where I am and it's not giving me what I need, that's a conversation. And I think sometimes it's a relationship ender. And I think relationships ending is really okay. And in fact, like including friendships, not in I think like allowing friendships to end or relationships to end or change is something we really are averse to. And it just doesn't have to mean anyone did anything wrong. It could just mean, in fact, like another statistic, my other favorite statistic from this, all the research I did for this book is that every 7 years, half of your closest relationships should turn over. So you look back 7 years, about half of your closest friends from that time should no longer be your closest friends. Half should still be your closest friends. And it will be the same thing 7 years from now. And there's exceptions, but that's sociologically about true. And I find that like such a relief. It just means like, this is what happens with relationships. They just change. It doesn't mean anyone did anything wrong. In fact, it's normal and good, and you can appreciate what you had while you had it.
Yeah, I really appreciate that recognition that relationships need to and must change, and it's actually an essential part of having them. And again, with romantic relationships and sexual relationships, I think there's a lot of resistance there. And I wanted to share an recent anecdote from my life, to maybe illustrate that. There, so I had the experience of dating someone for about a year and a half, and there was a lot of new relationship energy, and there was a lot of excitement around it. And I also sensed that it was going to be challenging to transition this relationship to something post that new relationship energy.
Yeah.
And for much of the relationship, I was kind of looking for, what will that connective tissue be?
Right.
Will this person be a part of my community? Will I be a part of their community? Will we do something creative together? Will there be some sort of like shared interest?
Right.
And it's like, we could not find it. We just couldn't find the traction there. And once we started going through like a rough patch, I really identified that the lack of that additional context beyond the new relationship energy and the kind of like chemistry between us left us really vulnerable and the relationship really fragile, because there was no meaningful container for it to change inside of.
Right.
And I think inside conversations with that person, I was occasionally, I think mostly lovingly, accused of claiming that romantic love was counter-revolutionary. And I would joke back that like in a little bit, yes. Like romantic love as we understand it, and this is me kind of segueing into talking about the romance myth and Dean Spade, as we understand it culturally, it serves the purpose of directing us towards a relationship escalator that is supposed to create a nuclear family and children.
Yeah.
In the intentional absence of doing that, we have to find other ways of applying that kind of romantic energy and of thinking about it.
Yep.
And if we don't, at least in my experience, I feel like I will keep having the same relationship with kind of the same timer on it inside polyamory over and over and over again.
Oh, that's so well put. I love that anecdote. Absolutely.
So with that in mind, I was like, it didn't end well for us, unfortunately. Like the anecdote, it proved my point that we struggled and the relationship ended instead of changing, which was has been hard.
Yeah.
But has me thinking about this a lot, and has me thinking about the romance myth a lot. And we've mentioned it a couple of times on this podcast already. I know you talk about it in your book. Would you talk a little bit about it for our listeners? What do we mean when we say that? What are we talking about? How does it apply here?
Yeah, I mean, the romance myth is the idea that there is one person that you will find. There's like there's a set of stages you move through where you see them, they're perfect, you love them, they're, the moon, the clouds, the solar system, and you fall in love and it's perfect and you get married and you have kids and then you're happy for the rest of your life, and that's enough, and that's enough, and that's enough, and that's enough. And it's the that's enoughness that is really a myth. I did a sticker for Dean about the romance about the romance myth, and I didn't use that turn of phrase in my book, but I do feel like central to the whole premise of the book is like it's so frustrating when you believe this myth, when you believe there is a significant other who can meet at least most of my needs and I should be good, to just try to I have a set of illustrations about this where it's like you feel like you have emptiness in your life, and then you imagine that this person's going to fill all of your exact little empty spots. And I don't know, the analogy I think I use is it's like you're wanting to build a chair and then you go to a store that sells wood and then you're frustrated when you don't have hammers and nails and that this wood store doesn't also just have hammers and nails and a saw and like a sander. It has mostly the thing you need, which is like wood. You like mostly need that, but you can't get to chair with just wood. And so you keep being like, store, have nails, like have nails. If you really love me, you would like have nails. And the store's like, I'm so sorry. I'll try, but I am a wood store. And then this sort of like coming up against that, the reality of like how, I mean, I'm oversimplifying it, obviously, but like, it is so frustrating to keep asking a wood store for nails when in fact there's like a nail store over there that's like you don't really need that much from and they don't need that much from you, and you actually could just go over there and get nails and like still have the wood. So I don't know, I get lost in the analogy. I've gotten lost in the analogy, but my point is that no one's going to meet all your needs. And no matter how beautifully romantic, I love my husband more than I thought I ever could love anyone. Like truly, I mean, he's in that book, the first book, Money Love, which I started writing in like 2016 and now it's 2025. And I remember being like, well, if this book comes out and that relationship is ruined, I'm going to be embarrassed. But I just love him more. And like, I feel like way more solid in our relationship than ever. And we have a kid. We have a neurodivergent kid, and there's so many problems. But like, if it was just him, oh man, I mean, if it was just me, I feel like I'm very difficult. He like needs to have non-difficult people who are, there for him as well. So I don't know. It's just too bad that people suffer this way when they don't have to.
Yeah. I think a lot of what you said about the chair, if you went back to like early seasons of this podcast, you would probably hear like us doing a fair amount of like talking about that kind of thing as a sort of like defense of or explanation for polyamory, right? Like one person, like monogamy doesn't work very well because one person can't meet all your needs. But I kind of like find ourselves in this place now where we like, and I think what Sarah was kind of speaking to is like, even inside of polyamory, you can also kind of like make those same mistakes somehow, or like have that same misperception that like, maybe what we're trying to do, maybe the mistake is that we're trying to like, just have that kind of relationship over and over again in sequence, or trying to have like multiple of them at the same time. Like, Sarah and I have a relationship that like, you sort of similar to the one that you described with your husband, where like we meet a lot of our needs and like then we're out here like dating other people or in relationships with other people. But finding how those things complement each other is tricky. And maybe it starts with even knowing what your needs are in the first place. Like speaking for myself, I'm like, I'm 44 years old. I don't know my need. I'm just now like feel like I'm starting to kind of try to figure that out, because they're always bounced off other people and always bounced off like, well, does this person, are they getting their needs met by me? Do they like me? And like that validation is like sort of enough. That's not a question.
No, but I think that's really salient. And I think I find like I had a panic attack recently. It was a chicken death related panic attack. I have chickens. The chicken death was really gnarly, and I was parenting alone. And I just like couldn't be parenting alone in that moment. My husband was having a soccer game, and honestly, like he is a person who is so solid. Like any chicken death would be fine for him. But I there are other things going on. I had a panic attack. I was like, oh shit, I'm alone with my kid. I don't want to like make my kid take care of me if she's 4. But I can't stop having this panic attack. And those are the moments where you have the thought of like, who can I possibly call right now? And you have the answers come in your mind. They flash in. And those are really important moments where you see, oh, there's a person who's meeting a need. I found myself reaching out to a new friend who like I've gotten really close to since having kids. And mostly, I don't know, I'm sure you guys had this experience when you were new parents. Like, it's like when you're first polyamorous and you're just like, yes, you, yes, you, yes, you. Like, all these new parent friends without like really thinking about slowing down to think about like who was the right fit as a parent friend, because we just all have kids, but we're
Not a lot of discernment, just a
Right,
lot
like-
of enthusiasm and need.
Like, I also have a kid, and like I need my kid to have kid friends, and I need, someone who also knows about pack and plays or whatever. And but I, as she's 4, we're settling into like, oh, I'm finding the people who are really aligned. And I found myself like wanting to call another parent. And it was like so obvious that's what I needed, was like a person who knew how to deal with a kid. She couldn't come over, but I just called and was like, I need to figure out how to become a parent again. Like I need someone to just talk to me down off of this spot so that I can be a parent again. And if I had called Jess, who's my closest best friend, who's not a parent, she would have wanted to like help me with my feelings. She's like a therapist. So she would have wanted me to like feel it and like be in it and what's going on. And I just needed someone who knew about being a parent, who I could trust to be crying in front of, who would say, okay, you're going to be fine. It's all going to be okay. This is very hard. Take a deep breath. Go have a glass of water. I'm going to sing you a song. Now go back. Here, put T on speakerphone. I'll talk to her for a minute. You just go take your deep breaths. And there we are. We're good. So that is like a moment where you identify, okay, I need parent friends who I trust. Truly it's like one. You need like one, because there just don't need that many people at the end of the day. Luke, my husband, is a person who really needs to go out and see movies and concerts, which is so masculine of him. But it is true. Like, he really likes to go out and do those things. They're really important for his body. And I hate to do that. So he really needs partners who will do that with him. And when we were early in our relationship, he was looking for romantic partners who would do that with him. And now that we have a kid, it's like, I need people who understand I have a kid. So his friends are not romantic partners, but they are partners. There's like a distinction, because it's like, I need people who will show up for me to go see movies and shows with me, and also won't need me to like have sex with them all the time.
Be like super sexy and seductive and charming
Or
and
romantic.
beguiling and romantic.
But that
Yeah,
might
it's
change.
exhausting.
Like, we're in early parenthood right now. Like, this is just not our romance. Sex is not our main focus. And it was 10 years ago. Like, I needed someone kinky 10 years ago. He needed someone who wanted to wrestle with him 10 years ago. Like, sometimes that's, and then we also have friends who are older and poly who are like looking for, group sex opportunity. There's all kinds of needs. Right now, our needs are real parenting related. And I'm hoping they won't be forever, but they are right now.
Yeah. And this identification of needs and how challenging it is maybe segues into a question I had for you about the distinction between self-work and self-care, and how important that is for building kin and kinship. Having needs is really vulnerable. Identifying them even inside of yourself can feel vulnerable. Sharing them with someone else can feel vulnerable, because you may have to encounter that they won't be met in a relationship that's really important to you.
Oh my God, yes.
And that's scary. I think it's also vulnerable because we live in such a mindset of emotional scarcity and care scarcity that there is a sense that if you get a need met by someone, then you're in arrears to them.
Oh my God,
you're going to owe
yes.
them something. It feels like a powerless position to be in. This is the kind of stuff that gives me panic attacks in the middle of the night, just for the record, Sophie. That kind of like spiraling down of how actually disconnected we are from ourselves and each other, and how like abusive the culture has
Oh
gotten
my
in
God,
that way.
yes. Mhm.
And like the deep work that we actually have to do, which will not just be done by having radical relationship structures. It
Mhm.
won't just be done by being poly. It won't just be done by living collectively.
Mhm.
It has to be done in this way that identifies, I think, some of that as trauma,
Mhm.
and identifies like how few powerful, positive models we have of
Oh
being
yeah.
connected to
Mhm.
ourselves and others.
Yeah.
Um, that's my segue into asking you a little bit about like the self-care, self-work. Why is that so important to building community? What do those words mean to you?
I mean, I am more hooked by the one of the things that you said, which was about this, like, when you lean on someone, the feeling of, okay, now I owe you something, or like saving up. You're leaning on someone for like a real emergency, because you can't just be the person who's always asking for help. And that you want to be mindful of how everybody has a million things going on, and you can't just be always leaning when no one's leaning on you. And that is, to me, really, really interesting, and like right at the heart of all of this. Like, we talk about connection, but you can't be truly connected in a way that's clean, or like mathematically clear, um or tidy, or without conflict. Like, none of that is really possible, I don't think. And one of the, I'm going to mispronounce her name, but Dr. Pooja Lakshmin, who wrote Real Self-Care a couple of years ago, said something that I just felt like really seen by, which was, you can't have a boundary without a consequence, which was like, we were talking a lot about boundaries a couple of years ago, like, oh, no is a complete sentence. But like, okay, but is it? Like, yes, but like, are you really just going to say no to somebody? Because every time you say no, you're going to let somebody down. You're going to, like, maybe, especially if you're a person in a marginalized community, like, jeopardize your position in a workplace environment. Like, a no is not safe. Like, we are acting like it should be. So we want to live in a world where it's safe, but we don't, because we're not living in an honest, like, honesty is not safe. So that's really tricky. And I am really interested in, like, what would it take to shift that, so that you could say no to somebody, and like, hey, I really want to say yes, but I can't. Like, I really want to say yes, and I'm not gonna, because I have to, like, protect something going on for me right now. And also, how can you hear no without feeling like really fucking rejected? Every time someone tells me no, I'm like, oh God, I shouldn't have asked. I can't believe I even asked. So how do we get around that? I think that's like what I want to teach my kid how to do, because I also think generationally it's not going to happen for us. So it's like a question of, how do I get to live in this world? There's a lot of things I feel that way about. So with my partners, and I'm including non-romantic, it's a circle of about 8 people. Like, this is a conversation, and then this is going to sound so wacky. Like, it's going to sound real woo-woo in a way, but like, we do this, like, I'm going to ask you for something and you're going to say no to it, and we're just going to go back and forth, like, practicing what it sounds like to be like, hey, can you come and help me cook dinner tomorrow night? And then I just want you're going to have to say no. And it's wild how hard it is. Even when you're in a like fake make-believe situation, everyone is acknowledging is a fake make-believe situation, to still say no, because we're so wired to be helpful and to say yes when we can't or don't want to. And so the result has been, I have a few relationships that are truly in that vein. However, it's fucking messy. Like, yes, there's like fighting that happens, or, ooh, there was a miscommunication, or like, whatever. But I can tell these are the relationships I want to do that inside of, when I know I'm okay with that person coming over to my house when it's trashed. That's my metric, is like, if the person comes over to my house and I'm okay that I'm not going to tidy at all, and also not apologize to them, that's a good indication. This is a person I want to practice the no and yes, and, asking for help about more things. It's still so hard. And to say I have like 2 or 3 relationships where we're able to do this is like a huge accomplishment, and only has happened since writing this book because I didn't want to be a hypocrite when having conversations like this. But it feels really good, but it's hard.
It really is. And it's interesting that, speaking of mess, I've noticed that the relationships I have where people actually say no to me the most are the ones where I'm most trusted.
Mhm.
So I had 2 examples of this just in the past 24 hours that were coming up for me. One was I was hanging out with my daughter, and I think that it's relevant to identify her gender here. And we were hanging out. It was just the 2 of us, and she like pulled a cute face, and I kissed her on the nose. And she was like, "You kissed me on the nose, and I didn't like it." And I was like, "Oh." And she was like, "It's too close to my mouth. It made me feel weird."
Mm.
And I was like, "Okay,
Amazing.
thank you for telling me that.
Incredible.
I will not do that again." And the like storm of emotions that it brought up in me in the moment was actually one of those times when you're like, "Oh my God, parenting is such a gift." You're like, where else would I have this experience?
Yeah.
First of all, I was like, I feel ashamed. Did I do something wrong? I'm embarrassed. That's a weird feeling. Think about that. Don't put that on your daughter. Right? um, did I ever say that as a child to anyone ever? Did I ever say that they had touched me in a way I didn't like? Ever? No, I don't think I ever did. How many times have I said that as an adult? That someone had touched me in a way I didn't like, and fully expected, the way it seemed my daughter did, that I wouldn't have to manage their feelings about it. You know, that she was just trusting me to receive the no and we would move on with the next thing.
Yeah.
It was
I
a
love that.
wild,
Yeah.
wild experience. And I was just like, I am so happy that this happened.
Mhm.
And also so sad that it seems really rare and
Yeah.
unusual and precious. So that came up for me. The other thing was about polyamory specifically. Variety of things going on today. It's a day without school, so there's like childcare stuff. Alex had been asked to go out with another partner. I was like, well, I have this need for us to actually be together for X, Y, and Z reasons. And Alex ultimately was like, no, I'm going to go out with this other partner instead. In both of these cases, I found myself thinking, being the person that is being told no is in fact like a gift,
Mhm.
even as it's very, very difficult.
Mhm. Mhm.
So just kind of to your point, it's hard to practice. It's rare. It's important if we want to actually be in meaningful community with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that does get to the heart of your question about self-work and self-care. And that is the work, is the like being present with discomfort as you're, the feeling of I feel guilty or I feel bad is so present for so many of us when we hear a no, that it is work to say, oops, that's a faulty check engine. Like that isn't real. And, or like the feeling is real, but like where that's coming from a lot of socialization from a long time. And like the no is actually safe, but feels shitty. And that being able to say what you just said about, this is a gift is like, that's the thing. It's so hard though, but it really is the thing. And then, it also, Dean talks about this a lot in his book, about not campaigning. So like when you feel the feeling of, I feel guilty, I feel bad, I feel shitty, someone said no, I feel really upset. And then you go and talk to somebody else about it, to have that person not just go, oh, fuck that guy, he should have said yes to you. That's really important too, to figure out how to be in a network of people who can see everybody's humanity. It's really hard because, again, yes, we're socialized to be like pitting ourselves against each other, to be saying like, if my feelings got hurt, it's somebody else's fault, and that person should be punished socially or emotionally in some way. And actually, like, okay, your feelings are going to get hurt all the time if you're like in a radically honest world, and we want that for our kids for sure. So your feelings are going to get hurt all the time. So we need a different way of talking to each other about it, so we can talk about feelings without punishing people.
Yeah. And I think, with all of that said, I also feel like even if we like really work very hard on ourselves to be able to, give no's, accept no's, express needs, and not be afraid to do that, receive other people's needs in a way that's aligned with ours. I was thinking about just how, those are sort of like individual journeys, right? But if we're talking about like being in a community of kinship, it's first of all certainly true that like most of us, or we're all going to be on different stages, places in those journeys, and some of us are going to continue to be like bad at those things or struggle with those things, and maybe that's where some of that conflict will arise. But I also just like wonder, I think this is a little bit of a meme right now of people acknowledging that like being in community, like we've all, especially white people, have all been like, I just wish I had more community, and community is wonderful. And like people coming in and saying, well, wait a minute, community kind of fucking sucks sometimes too.
Really?
Like it's not community unless it's hard, unless it's like, and some of that is probably like these individual people struggles, but some of it is also just like you're dispersing like, crises and emergencies. Like if you're in a bigger community, then it's much more likely that on any given day, somebody's fucked up by something. And like, we all have to attend to that. So I guess I'm curious how, if this comes up in the book, or like how you kind of think about the hard parts of like, even once we reach this kind of ideal, like what is it actually like?
Well, yeah, it has to be hard. It is not, that's life. That's like the reality of any time you feel like you figured anything out, then there's a new thing that is the problem. Like that is the cruelty of being alive. And then I guess you die at some point, which is another whole thing. So like
Sweet release.
This is what I tell people. I'm like, it's really hard to be a human being. It's really hard to be a person. But the good news is it ends.
Right. And then your community comes to your memorial service.
One would hope. I mean, it is definitely hard. I do think it's important that you brought up white people in this, because this is like a white person problem, or at least a like Western post-industrial problem. And also did a lot of like research on this for the book about, I'm talking about like, oh, this is so radical and transformative. Well, we're just the only people who aren't doing it. I mean, it's like all, even in America, people living in multi-generational families, that's immigrants and people who are non-white, or people who are living below the poverty line. And the research on that, and this speaks to your larger question about like, doesn't it kind of suck? The research on that is people who live in multi-generational families, regardless of how there are the problems that you mentioned at the beginning, Sarah, or at some point in this talk, Sarah, report higher levels of life satisfaction than people who don't. And it's just like, at the end of the day, it's not going to be great. At the end of the day, like, do you want to have more satisfaction in your life? Well, all of the data and all of the research on this is just, if we're talking science, is showing us that net positive. If you're living among more people and are connected to more people, it's a net positive for every age group. And a lot of that does have to do, we've talked a lot about, polyamory and dating. A lot of that does have to do with intergenerational relationships. So like your friends having relationships with your kids having relationships with your parents' friends, or like people who are older, much older, especially people getting to end of life. That's a time when we get away from each other. Like the isolation just explodes, and we just shove people into homes or like corners and say, I don't want to look at that. I don't want to deal with it. When that's a great opportunity for caretaking. Nobody wants to look at it. But when you do, and we all come together, like, people live longer, but also there is less fear about death and unknown, because we're face to face with the reality. And I talk a lot about, like, I really feel strongly that I want my single friends to hang out with my kids or other people's kids. And I'm like, I don't want to act like you're not going to like it. It's not like it's fun. Like you'll have there's parts of it that you're going to really like, but like mostly it's broccoli. Mostly it's brushing your teeth. Mostly it's like, it's good for you. I want you to like have this experience because it's good for you and it's good for my kid and it's good for me and it's good for all of us. I'm going to love it because I need some time. you won't like it, but I'll be really grateful to you and it will be good for you. So I want to look at it as like not you should want to hang out with kids because it's so great. It's really hard.
not.
It's
Yeah.
not great, but it is great. But you see what I mean? So like the hard part is part of it. There's no thing that is just only good except maybe blueberries.
Alex doesn't like them.
Well,
What? I like blueberries.
You're always complaining about the.
I don't like them when they're mushy. A good blueberry.
a good maybe
Portland
a
area
good
blueberry. Yeah.
a fresh off the
Yeah.
vine.
Yeah. I think it's great. So pointed that right now our daughter is downstairs, like tormenting our housemate life partner probably so that we can record this podcast. And he's probably not liking it.
Yeah.
No, I'm sure he's not. He was like begrudgingly like, okay. Well, and I want to do a quick time check.
Yeah.
Sophie, I know
I have to go to therapy.
you have
Yeah.
to go to therapy. So I just wanted to say how much I appreciate the brass tacks of your book and how you don't just talk about like these research concepts and like the sort of bigger political picture, but you also talk about how we can do it. And that's so present in the way you've talked to us today.
Thanks.
Like what it's like to have a panic attack and call someone who can help talk you down when you're parenting alone, to challenge yourself to build intimacy, varied intimacy with people that includes things like letting them come over to your house when it's dirty, building resilience around the idea that relationships don't always feel good and community doesn't either. And in
Mhm.
fact, the larger project that we're engaging in is one where we're building some, to use an overused word, some like resilience
Mhm.
and a more kind of mature orientation
Mhm.
towards what it feels like to be in relationship,
Mhm.
which means that there's going to be struggle, there's going to be discomfort, there's going to be conflict. And in fact, like, not only will we survive that, but we will feel more satisfied in our lives as a result. We're not going to be, and this is, again, one of my famous digs at polyamory, we're not going to be more satisfied in our lives because we're so happy and all of these relationships are so great and we've cracked the code on the human condition. It's actually because we will be sharing what it feels like to be in the human condition together in a more meaningful way.
Yeah. I mean, I thank you and I appreciate your being mindful of time. And to speak to that, I said this a lot when my first book came out, was that like, I think whatever relationship structure you choose, you're choosing a huge sacrifice. So if you're choosing monogamy, or if you're monogamous, you're sacrificing ever kissing or having sex with, or maybe even a very close emotional relationship with, depending on your monogamy style, with another person ever for the rest of your life. And actually that's quite beautiful and amazing. And like such a gift you're giving, because love is hard. If you're polyamorous, you're sacrificing emotional comfort and stability and like knowing for sure that things are going to be like secure on a day that you're feeling not secure. Like you're giving that up. That's also like an incredibly beautiful thing that we do in the face of love. And both of those I think are really special and amazing. But there's no love without enormous sacrifice. Like love is sacrifice. And so, if you're looking for a cheat code, that means it's going to all be easy. That's no love for you. But also you're not going to have a very meaningful and fulfilled life.
So if people want to check out your new book, in spite of you admitting that there is no cheat code inside of it for a satisfying life, what should they do? Is it out yet?
It's out today, or we're recording on November 11th, so it's out as of November 11th. It's everywhere. Can just Google Kin, the Future Family. I'm on Instagram at Sophie Lucido Johnnson, and I have link to it there too, so you can find me there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time,
Gosh,
Sophie.
thank you guys for having me. This has been a delight.
It was a wonderful conversation.
Yeah,
Thank you. Enjoy therapy.
Okay.
Or don't. Have it be what you need it to be.
Thank you.
Just hopefully you'll talk about us.
The whole time.
That's
The
most
whole
important
entire
thing,
time. Yeah,
Okay,
I plan
cool.
on it. Okay, thanks.
Bye, Sophie.
Bye.
That was Sarah and Alex's interview with Sophie Lucido Johnnson. You can find links to all of her work in the show notes. And before we sign off, we have a quick reminder that Sarah and Alex are going to be leading a workshop on March 21st, 2026,
Yes.
all about intentional non-monogamy. What can people expect?
Yeah, this is really exciting. So this is our first, I guess it's our first workshop under the Mistakes Were Made like moniker. Alex and I have taught, as you know, many workshops together. And I have a background in specializing in working with polyamorous relationships and individuals, queer communities, and kind of a specialization in working with folks who are first opening up, whether that's like individually or in a couple. So that this is like a group of people I love working with. I think that it's a moment in someone's life and relationship where there's just so much opportunity for learning about yourself, learning about the world, learning about other people. It's also often pretty tumultuous and challenging. And I think it's a period when people need and should seek out extra support. Yeah. So when I think about the original mistake that Alex and I made when we opened up, it was that we didn't do that. So this workshop is really with those folks in mind. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about common pitfalls in early stages of non-monogamy. We'll talk about what are some basic just like tools for building a solid foundation for learning, because you're learning a new relationship style. Right?
Yeah.
And then connecting to what are your values and intentions as someone who's moving towards polyamory and non-monogamy, because I think that's also really a key. This is a moment of identity development for people too. And there are as many ways to practice non-monogamy and be polyamorous as there are people. So really finding early on, like, what am I hoping to experience in these early stages? What are some of my intentions and values around that, so that you can have a little bit of a compass as you enter into this world that can feel overwhelming sometimes. So it's going to be great. It's a full day, 10 to 4, I think. Yeah, it's 10 to 4. We're going to do it in Seattle. There's going to be delicious food. It's going to be pretty small and intimate. Like at first we're thinking 12 people tops. So
Okay.
It'll fill up fast.
Yeah.
But we're hoping that we'll offer more.
Ooh.
We've been asked to do this. And so hopefully this one is a hit and we'll get a chance to build on it.
It sounds so great. I love it. Yeah. Well, find tickets for that linked from our Instagram account and here in the show notes. Make sure to follow, like, listen, tell your friends all about Mistakes Were Made. You can find us at MistakesCast on Instagram or send us an email at mistakescast@gmail.com. And we will be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Jess. Bye, everyone.
Bye.